Hello friend, and welcome to Science for Sleep. Did you know that honey is one of the few foods on Earth that can remain edible for thousands of years, without preservatives, refrigeration, or modern packaging? This lasting quality comes from how honey is formed, how it is structured, and how it interacts with air, water, and time. Honey begins as a simple liquid produced by flowering plants. This liquid, known as nectar, is thin, watery, and designed to move easily. It flows from plant tissues into flowers, where it waits to be collected. Over time, through a series of small, repeated actions, this nectar becomes honey. The transformation is gradual. It happens through concentration, movement, and exposure to air, rather than through force or speed. From a scientific point of view, honey is a dense solution of sugars held within a small amount of water. Most of its mass consists of carbohydrates, primarily the simple sugars fructose and glucose. Water makes up a smaller portion, usually less than 1/5 of the total weight. Alongside these main components are tiny amounts of organic acids, enzymes, minerals, pollen grains, and aromatic compounds. These trace components may seem insignificant by quantity, but they shape how honey behaves. They influence its aroma, its color, and the way it changes over time. They also reflect the environment where the honey was formed, carrying subtle information about plants, soil, and climate. One of honey's defining physical features is its thickness. At room temperature, honey moves slowly. It stretches as it pours, forming long threads before separating. This behavior comes from its high sugar concentration, which makes it far denser than water. Honey contains more dissolved sugar than water would normally be able to hold. This condition is known as supersaturation. It means the sugars remain dissolved only because of how the honey was concentrated and stored. As a result, honey exists in a delicate balance, stable, yet always capable of changing. Another important characteristic of honey is its acidity. Most honeys fall within a mildly acidic range, shaped by organic acids produced during its formation. This acidity plays a role in honey's long-term stability and helps explain why it remains unchanged for extended periods. Honey also contains enzymes that were introduced during its formation. These enzymes work slowly. They do not act all at once or produce sudden effects. Instead, they contribute quietly to honey's chemistry over time, supporting its structure and preserving its composition. Because of this combination, low water content, high sugar concentration, natural acidity, and enzymatic presence, honey remains stable for very long periods. It does not require refrigeration. It does not spoil easily. Its structure resists the growth of most microorganisms simply through its physical and chemical balance. Over time, honey may change in appearance. It may deepen in color. It may become thicker or develop crystals. These changes are part of its natural behavior and reflect slow shifts within its internal structure rather than deterioration. Honey is best understood as a substance shaped through collaboration. Plants provide the original sugars. Bees collect, transform, and store them. Air, temperature, and time complete the process. This layered origin gives honey its complexity. Different flowers contribute different sugars and aromatic compounds. Different environments influence how quickly water is removed. Different seasons affect how long honey is allowed to settle and mature. Because of this, each honey carries subtle variations. Some remain light and fluid for long periods. Others crystallize quickly. Some deepen toward amber or brown, while others stay pale and clear. These differences are expressions of process rather than quality. Honey does not exist as a static object. It is a material that continues responding to its surroundings, slowly, quietly, and predictably. It flows when warmed. It thickens when cooled. It settles when left undisturbed. At its core, honey is a record of accumulation, a substance formed through countless small motions, a concentrated result of time, repetition, and environmental balance. For now, it rests as it is, dense, stable, and patiently unchanged, holding within it the traces of how it came to be. Before honey becomes thick, stable, and long-lasting, it exists in a much simpler form. It begins as nectar. Nectar is a watery liquid produced by flowering plants. Its purpose is straightforward: to attract insects. By offering a source of sugar, plants encourage pollinators to visit, brush against reproductive structures, and carry pollen onward. Chemically, nectar is very different from honey. It contains a much higher proportion of water, often more than 70%. Its sugars are usually present as sucrose, glucose, and fructose, but in lower concentrations. This makes nectar light, fluid, and quick to move. On its own, nectar does not last. With so much available water, it can ferment or spoil easily. It is designed for immediate exchange, not storage. The transformation from nectar into honey begins when a foraging bee visits a flower and draws nectar into a specialized internal pouch known as the crop. This structure is sometimes called the honey stomach, though it is separate from the bee's digestive system. As the nectar enters the crop, the first changes begin. Enzymes already present in the bee start interacting with the sugars. One of the most important is invertase, which gradually breaks sucrose into its simpler components, glucose and fructose. This initial step does not thicken the nectar yet. Instead, it prepares the sugars for later concentration and long-term stability. A foraging bee may visit hundreds or even thousands of flowers during a single trip. Each visit contributes a small amount of nectar. Over time, the crop fills, and the bee returns to the hive. Once inside, the nectar is transferred to other bees through mouth-to-mouth exchange. This transfer may happen many times. Each exchange spreads the nectar into thinner layers and exposes it to air, allowing moisture to begin escaping. At this early stage, the substance is still far from honey. It remains thin, glossy, and watery. However, with each transfer, its water content slowly decreases and its sugar concentration increases. This gradual concentration is central to honey's safety and stability. As water content drops, conditions become less favorable for microbes that rely on moisture to grow. Honey that has been fully ripened inside the hive is safe for most people to consume. Its low water content, natural acidity, and sugar concentration work together to limit microbial activity. There is one important exception worth stating clearly and calmly. Honey can naturally contain dormant bacterial spores that are harmless to older children and adults. In infants under 1 year of age, the digestive system is still developing, and these spores can pose a risk. For this reason, honey is not recommended for infants under 12 months. Beyond that specific case, honey's structure makes it one of the most stable foods humans use. Back in the hive, bees continue removing moisture from the nectar by spreading it into wax cells. They increase airflow by fanning their wings, maintaining warm temperatures that encourage evaporation. This process may take days. As water content drops toward about 18%, the substance crosses a threshold. It becomes honey. At this point, bees seal the cell with a thin cap of wax. This capping limits moisture exchange with the surrounding air and protects the honey from absorbing additional water. The result is a dense, concentrated substance that resists fermentation and spoilage under normal conditions. It is important to understand that honey's safety does not come from additives or external preservation. It comes from physical balance. Sugar binds available water. Acids lower pH. Enzymes contribute subtle chemical effects over time. This balance allows honey to remain stable at room temperature. It can sit undisturbed for long periods, changing slowly rather than breaking down. At this stage, honey is no longer nectar, but it still carries traces of its origin. The types of sugars present: the aromatic compounds, the minerals drawn from soil through plant roots. Each batch reflects the flowers visited, the weather during collection, and the conditions inside the hive. Honey's journey from nectar is not a single action. It is a sequence of small adjustments. Transfer after transfer. Evaporation after evaporation. Through this steady process, a fragile liquid becomes a stable one, prepared to remain as it is, quietly unchanged, for months or even years. Honey does not emerge from a single action or a single individual. It is the result of a living system working together in steady coordination. A honeybee colony functions as a collective organism. While each bee is a separate body, many of the processes that sustain the colony only make sense when viewed at the group level. Honey production is one of these processes. Within a typical honeybee colony, there are three main types of bees: the queen, the drones, and the workers. Each plays a specific biological role that supports the survival of the whole. The queen is the colony's primary reproductive individual. Her presence stabilizes the social structure of the hive through pheromones that influence behavior and coordination. While the queen does not participate directly in honey production, her role ensures continuity across seasons. Drones exist primarily for reproduction. They do not forage, build wax, or process nectar. Their presence rises and falls with the colony's seasonal rhythm, expanding during periods of growth and receding as resources tighten. The majority of work within the hive is carried out by worker bees. These are all female, and their roles shift gradually as they age. This age-related task progression allows the colony to function efficiently without central planning. In the earliest days of adult life, worker bees tend to remain inside the hive. They clean cells, tend to developing larvae, and help regulate internal temperature. As their bodies mature, they begin producing wax and assisting with nectar processing. Later still, many workers transition into foragers. These bees leave the hive to collect nectar, pollen, water, and plant resins. Foraging is physically demanding and energetically costly, and it typically occurs later in a worker's life. This progression from internal tasks to external ones spreads risk across the colony. Younger bees remain protected, while older bees take on roles that expose them to greater environmental stress. Foraging itself follows a structured pattern. Bees navigate using visual cues from the landscape, the position of the sun, and internal timekeeping mechanisms. They travel varying distances depending on resource availability, sometimes covering several kilometers in a single trip. Once a forager locates a reliable nectar source, information is shared within the hive. Movement patterns and chemical cues allow other bees to locate the same flowers. This communication increases efficiency without requiring centralized control. Energy management is central to all of this activity. Flying requires a large expenditure of energy, and nectar serves as immediate fuel as well as long-term storage. The decision to collect nectar instead of pollen, or to focus on one plant species over another, reflects the colony's current needs. Inside the hive, temperature and humidity are actively regulated. Worker bees generate heat by flexing flight muscles and circulate air by fanning their wings. These actions help maintain conditions that support nectar dehydration and honey storage. Honey production fits into this broader system as a form of energy banking. Nectar arrives as a temporary resource. Honey becomes a stable reserve. This reserve allows the colony to survive periods when flowers are unavailable. In colder climates, honey supports the colony through winter months when foraging stops entirely. In warmer regions, it provides continuity during dry seasons or gaps between flowering cycles. The quantity of honey stored reflects environmental conditions as well as colony health. Abundant flowering leads to surplus storage. Scarcity shifts the colony's activity toward conservation. Importantly, bees do not store honey randomly. Cells intended for honey differ from those used for brood rearing. Storage areas are organized to support temperature control, accessibility, and long-term preservation. The behavior that leads to honey production is guided by instinctive patterns shaped through evolution. These patterns favor repetition, efficiency, and gradual accumulation rather than speed. Viewed this way, honey becomes the visible outcome of countless small decisions made by many individuals over time. Each bee responds to immediate cues: temperature, scent, available space, and internal colony signals. There is no single moment when honey is decided. Instead, it emerges from steady participation in a shared system. This system does not rush. It adjusts continuously, responding to changes in weather, plant availability, and internal demand. Honey, as a result, carries the imprint of this biological coordination. It reflects the movement of bees across landscapes, the structure of the hive, and the rhythm of collective work. Through this lens, honey appears less as a product and more as a stored expression of life working together, quietly, precisely, and over time. Once nectar has been transformed and stored, honey settles into a form that is chemically distinct. Its behavior, stability, and texture arise from the way its components interact with one another over time. At its core, honey is a solution of sugars dissolved in water. The two dominant sugars are fructose and glucose. Together, they make up the majority of honey's mass. Fructose is more soluble in water than glucose. Because of this, it tends to remain dissolved even when honey becomes very concentrated. Glucose, by contrast, has lower solubility and plays a larger role in crystallization. The ratio between these two sugars varies from one honey to another. This ratio influences how sweet the honey tastes, how quickly it crystallizes, and how it behaves when stored. In addition to fructose and glucose, honey contains smaller amounts of other sugars. These include sucrose, maltose, and various complex carbohydrates formed during enzymatic processing. Though present in lower quantities, they contribute to honey's texture and flavor complexity. Water is the second major component of honey. In ripe honey, water content is usually around 18%. This low moisture level is one of the most important factors in honey's long-term stability. With so little free water available, most microorganisms cannot grow. Sugar molecules bind water tightly, reducing what is chemically available for microbial activity. This is a physical effect rather than a sterilizing one. Honey also contains organic acids, the most abundant of which is gluconic acid. This acid forms gradually through enzyme activity during honey's production. It gives honey its mild acidity and contributes to its preservation. The acidic environment influences both flavor and stability. It sharpens sweetness slightly and creates conditions that discourage many bacteria and molds. Enzymes are another key part of honey's chemical makeup. These enzymes originate primarily from bees during nectar processing. Invertase breaks down sucrose into glucose and fructose. Amylase acts on starch-like compounds. Glucose oxidase contributes to the formation of gluconic acid and small amounts of hydrogen peroxide. These enzymes do not act all at once. Their activity is slow and continuous, shaped by temperature, moisture, and time. As honey ages, enzymatic activity gradually decreases, but its chemical structure remains intact. Honey also contains trace minerals such as potassium, calcium, magnesium, and iron. Though present in small quantities, these minerals influence color and electrical conductivity. Darker honeys often contain higher mineral content than lighter ones. Alongside minerals are aromatic compounds, volatile molecules that influence scent and flavor. These compounds originate from the flowers where nectar was collected and can vary widely between regions and seasons. Pollen grains are often present as well. They enter honey during nectar collection and processing. While they do not play a major role in honey's chemistry, they serve as markers of floral origin. Another notable characteristic of honey is its hygroscopic nature. Honey naturally attracts moisture from the surrounding air. If left exposed, it can absorb enough water to alter its stability. This property explains why honey is typically stored in sealed containers. When properly sealed, its internal balance remains steady. When exposed to high humidity, that balance can shift. Honey's chemical structure also explains why it changes slowly over time. Sugars may rearrange, acids may accumulate gradually, color may deepen. These changes occur without sudden breakdown. They reflect slow chemical reactions rather than spoilage. Heating honey alters its chemistry. High temperatures can reduce enzyme activity and accelerate the formation of certain byproducts. Gentle warming, however, primarily affects viscosity rather than composition. Through all of this, honey remains chemically resilient. Its components interact in predictable ways, governed by concentration, temperature, and time. Rather than relying on additives or external preservation, honey maintains itself through internal balance. Sugars, water, acids, enzymes, and trace compounds hold one another in place. This balance gives honey its distinctive presence, a substance that flows, thickens, crystallizes, and darkens, slowly and steadily, while remaining fundamentally unchanged. Honey's chemistry does not rush. It unfolds at its own pace, shaped by conditions rather than intervention. And within that quiet chemistry, honey holds its form, patient and precise, as it has for thousands of years. Honey appears stable when left undisturbed, yet within it, slow changes are always taking place. One of the most noticeable of these changes is crystallization. Crystallization is a natural process that occurs because honey contains more dissolved sugar than water can normally hold. This condition, known as supersaturation, allows sugars to remain dissolved only under specific circumstances. When those conditions shift, crystals begin to form. In honey, glucose is the primary sugar involved in crystallization. It is less soluble in water than fructose. As a result, glucose molecules tend to separate from the liquid and align into solid structures. These solid structures begin as microscopic crystals. At first, they are too small to see or feel. Over time, as more glucose molecules join them, the crystals grow. Temperature plays an important role in how quickly this happens. Cool conditions encourage glucose to crystallize. Warmer conditions allow more sugar to remain dissolved. This is why honey stored in cool rooms often becomes solid sooner than honey kept at warmer temperatures. Particles within honey can also influence crystallization. Tiny grains of pollen, bits of wax, or air bubbles can act as starting points, known as seed crystals. They give glucose molecules a surface on which to organize. As crystals grow, they change honey's texture. What was once smooth and fluid becomes thicker and grainier. The liquid portion becomes more concentrated, while solid crystals occupy more space. This shift does not indicate spoilage. It reflects a rearrangement of the same ingredients already present. The sugars, water, and acids remain the same. Only their physical arrangement changes. Different honeys crystallize at different rates. The ratio of glucose to fructose is one factor. Honeys with higher glucose content tend to crystallize more quickly. Those with higher fructose content may remain liquid for longer periods. Water content also matters. Honey with slightly higher moisture levels allows sugars more movement, slowing crystallization. Honey that is very dry encourages faster crystal formation. Over time, crystallization can continue until most of the glucose has formed solid structures. At this stage, honey may appear fully solid, opaque, or pale in color. Despite this, it remains chemically stable. Crystallized honey can return to a liquid state. Gentle warming dissolves glucose crystals back into solution. This process does not alter honey's fundamental composition when done carefully. Repeated cycles of warming and cooling can affect crystal size. Slow crystallization tends to produce larger, coarser crystals. Controlled crystallization produces fine, smooth textures. This principle is used to create creamed honey. In this form, crystallization is guided so that crystals remain very small. The result is a spreadable texture that stays stable over time. Beyond crystallization, honey also changes gradually in color and aroma. As it ages, honey may deepen from pale gold to amber or brown. This change occurs through slow chemical reactions involving sugars and trace compounds. These reactions happen more quickly at higher temperatures. Stored cool and dark, honey changes more slowly. Stored warm, it may darken faster. Texture, color, and aroma together serve as markers of time. They show how honey has interacted with its environment. Honey's viscosity also shifts with temperature. When warmed, honey flows more easily. When cooled, it thickens and resists movement. This sensitivity gives honey its characteristic behavior. It pours slowly, stretches into threads, and settles gradually. In this way, honey responds continuously to its surroundings. It does not remain fixed. It adjusts. Crystallization, thickening, and softening are all expressions of balance. They reflect how sugars and water find stable arrangements under changing conditions. These changes occur quietly. There is no moment when honey suddenly transforms. Instead, it shifts over days, weeks, and months. Through these slow movements, honey reveals its nature, a substance shaped by concentration rather than decay, one that carries time visibly within its texture. Left undisturbed, honey continues to exist in this state, responding to temperature, settling into form, and holding its structure with patience and calm. When honey rests, it appears still. Its surface smooths, its movement slows. Yet beneath that quiet surface, subtle changes continue to unfold. One of the most visible of these changes is crystallization. Crystallization occurs because honey contains more dissolved sugar than water would normally allow. This condition is known as supersaturation. It is stable, but only within certain boundaries. Within honey, different sugars behave differently. Fructose remains readily dissolved, even at high concentrations. Glucose, however, has a lower solubility. As conditions shift, glucose molecules begin to separate from the liquid. At first, this separation is microscopic. Individual glucose molecules align into small, ordered structures. These structures act as the earliest crystals. The process does not happen all at once. It begins slowly, often without visible change. Over time, more glucose molecules attach to these early structures, and the crystals grow. Crystallization requires a place to begin. Within honey, tiny particles provide these starting points. Grains of pollen, small fragments of wax, or even air bubbles can serve as surfaces where glucose molecules gather. These particles are naturally present in most honey. They are introduced during nectar collection and hive processing. Their presence helps explain why crystallization is common rather than rare. As crystals form, honey's internal balance begins to shift. The glucose that becomes solid leaves the surrounding liquid slightly changed. The remaining liquid becomes richer in fructose and contains a slightly higher proportion of water. This local redistribution matters. Even though the overall water content of honey remains low, the liquid areas between crystals can hold slightly more available moisture. Under certain conditions, this can allow yeast cells, if present, to become active. This is one reason crystallized honey may ferment more easily than fully liquid honey when exposed to additional moisture. The structure has changed, even though the ingredients have not. Despite this, crystallization itself is a sign of honey's natural chemistry at work. It reflects order rather than decay. The sugars are arranging themselves into stable forms. As crystallization progresses, honey's texture changes. What was once fluid becomes firm. Smoothness gives way to grain. Light scatters differently, often causing the honey to appear lighter or opaque. These changes happen gradually. There is no sudden moment of transformation. Honey moves from one state to another through accumulation rather than transition. Some honeys crystallize quickly. Others remain liquid for long periods. This variation depends largely on sugar composition and the presence of seed particles. Honeys with higher glucose content tend to crystallize sooner. Those richer in fructose remain fluid longer. Neither condition reflects quality or freshness. They reflect chemistry. Crystallization can continue until much of the glucose has formed solid structures. At that point, honey may appear entirely solid, yet it remains chemically stable. Its acidity, sugar concentration, and enzymatic background persist. Crystallized honey still responds to its environment. When warmed gently, glucose crystals dissolve back into solution. The honey returns to a liquid state without loss of structure when heating is gradual. When cooled again, crystals may reform. Each cycle reflects the same underlying balance between sugar and water. In this way, crystallization becomes a visible record of time. It shows how honey has interacted with temperature, motion, and stillness. It marks periods of rest and exposure. Rather than signaling an ending, crystallization shows continuity. Honey remains active at a molecular level, even while appearing still. This slow rearrangement aligns with honey's broader character. It is a substance shaped by concentration rather than speed, by repetition rather than force. Crystallization allows time to leave a trace. A shift in texture, a change in light, a quiet transformation that happens without urgency. Left undisturbed, honey continues this process patiently. Sugars align, structures settle, balance is maintained. Through crystallization, honey demonstrates how change can occur gently, without loss, without alarm, revealing the steady presence of time within matter itself. Honey responds continuously to temperature. It does not remain fixed in one state. Instead, it adjusts its movement, thickness, and structure in quiet, predictable ways. At warmer temperatures, honey flows more easily. Its viscosity decreases, allowing it to pour, stretch, and spread with less resistance. At cooler temperatures, movement slows. Honey thickens, resists flow, and settles more firmly into place. These changes occur without altering honey's fundamental composition. The sugars, water, and acids remain the same. Only their physical behavior shifts. Temperature plays an especially important role in crystallization. Cool conditions encourage glucose molecules to leave solution and form solid structures. In general, temperatures below about 10 degrees Celsius promote faster crystallization. At moderate room temperatures, around 21 degrees Celsius, honey tends to remain liquid for longer periods. At these temperatures, sugar molecules, have enough energy to stay dissolved, slowing the formation of crystals. Very warm temperatures produce a different effect. Honey becomes increasingly fluid, but prolonged heat can influence chemical reactions over time. For this reason, honey is often stored at moderate temperatures rather than extremes. Texture reflects this ongoing interaction with temperature. Honey kept cool may appear firm or grainy. The same honey, warmed gently, may return to a smooth, liquid state. This responsiveness gives honey a dynamic quality. It is neither permanently solid nor permanently liquid. It exists along a spectrum shaped by its surroundings. Crystallization itself can be guided through temperature control. When honey is cooled slowly and evenly, crystals form gradually and grow larger. This produces a coarse, granular texture. When crystallization is initiated using very fine seed crystals and controlled temperatures, a different texture emerges. The crystals remain small and evenly distributed. The honey becomes smooth, thick, and spreadable. This form is often known as creamed honey. Its texture is not accidental. It is the result of directing crystallization rather than preventing it. In this state, honey remains stable. The fine crystals limit further growth, keeping the texture consistent over time. Temperature still influences firmness, but large grain formation is reduced. Honey that has crystallized can return to a liquid form through gentle warming. When warmed gradually, glucose crystals dissolve back into solution. The honey regains its fluidity without changing its underlying composition. This transition does not require high heat. A warm water bath allows temperature to rise evenly. As warmth spreads, crystals soften and disappear. Once cooled again, honey may crystallize once more. This cycle can repeat many times. Each cycle reflects the same balance between sugar, water, and temperature. These changes are reversible. They do not indicate damage or loss. They show honey responding to physical conditions. Temperature also affects how honey feels in the mouth. Cool honey may seem firmer, with a thicker presence. Warm honey flows more readily and releases aroma more quickly. These sensory differences come from the same physical principles that govern flow and crystallization. Molecules move more freely when warmed. They slow and cluster when cooled. In storage, temperature influences honey's long-term appearance. Cool environments favor crystallization. Stable, moderate environments allow honey to remain liquid longer. This is why honey stored in kitchens may change more slowly than honey stored in cool cellars. It is also why honey taken from storage may behave differently once brought into a warmer room. Through all of this, honey remains structurally intact. It does not degrade simply because it changes texture. It adapts. Temperature acts as a quiet guide, shaping honey's behavior without altering its essence. Flow becomes thickness. Liquid becomes solid. Solid returns to liquid. These transitions happen without effort. They require no intervention beyond time and warmth. In this way, honey reflects its environment. It responds gently, settling into forms that match surrounding conditions. Temperature does not force honey to change. It invites adjustment. And honey, patient and responsive, continues to exist comfortably within those boundaries, flowing, thickening, and resting as conditions allow. honey does not remain completely unchanged over time. Even when sealed and undisturbed, it continues to move slowly along quiet chemical pathways. These changes happen gradually. They do not signal spoilage or instability. They reflect the way sugars, acids, and trace compounds interact as time passes. One of the most noticeable long-term changes in honey is darkening. Fresh honey may appear pale gold, nearly clear in some cases. Over months or years, it can deepen toward amber or brown. This shift in color comes from slow chemical reactions that occur naturally within honey. Among these are reactions between sugars and small amounts of amino acids present in trace quantities. These reactions are often grouped under the term Maillard reactions. In honey, these reactions proceed very slowly. They do not require cooking temperatures. They unfold over extended periods, influenced by storage conditions and temperature. As these reactions progress, honey may develop richer, more complex flavors. Aroma compounds shift slightly. Sweetness may feel rounder or deeper. Heat accelerates these processes. Honey stored in warm environments darkens more quickly than honey kept cool. Exposure to light can also contribute to gradual changes. Alongside color changes, certain chemical markers increase with time and heat exposure. One of these is hydroxymethylfurfuryl, often shortened to HMF. HMF forms as sugars slowly break down under acidic conditions. In freshly harvested honey, HMF levels are typically very low. As honey ages or is heated, these levels rise gradually. This increase serves as an indicator of storage history, rather than safety for most human uses. In typical amounts, HMF is not framed as a health concern for people. However, very high levels can indicate overheating or extended exposure to warmth. For bees, honey with elevated HMF levels may be unsuitable if used as feed. Because of this, beekeepers and processors pay attention to temperature and storage time. Gentle handling preserves honey's original structure more closely. Enzyme activity also changes as honey ages. Enzymes introduced during nectar processing do not remain active indefinitely. Over time, their activity decreases, especially when exposed to heat. Even as enzyme activity declines, honey's core stability remains. The sugar concentration and acidity that protect it from spoilage persist. Honey does not lose its ability to remain intact simply because it has aged. Texture may also change subtly with time. Crystallized honey may develop larger crystals if allowed to rest undisturbed for long periods. Liquid honey may thicken slightly as sugars continue to interact. These shifts happen slowly and without disruption. They do not alter honey's identity as a stable substance. Storage conditions influence the pace of all these changes. Cool, dark environments slow chemical reactions. Warm, bright conditions allow changes to occur more quickly. This is why honey is often stored away from direct light and heat. Such storage preserves color, aroma, and enzymatic remnants for longer periods. Importantly, aging does not move honey toward decay. It moves honey along a gradual continuum of chemical balance. Honey does not expire in the way fresh foods do. Instead, it matures. Its structure settles further into stability. In archaeological contexts, honey has been found sealed in containers thousands of years old. still chemically recognizable as honey. Its sugars remain. Its acidity remains. Its structure persists. What changes is nuance. Color deepens. Flavor softens or intensifies. Aroma shifts gently. These changes reflect time passing through matter. They are not abrupt events. They leave no sharp boundaries. Honey carries these traces quietly. It does not announce its age. It simply holds it. Through aging, honey demonstrates how a substance can remain intact while still responding to time. It shows how stability does not require stillness, and how endurance does not prevent change. Left stored and undisturbed, honey continues along this slow path, darkening slightly, adjusting subtly, and remaining patient as years move forward around it. Honey does not come from a single bee acting alone. It emerges from a coordinated system made up of many individuals, each responding to shared conditions within the hive. A honeybee colony functions as an integrated biological unit. While each bee has its own body and lifespan, the colony operates through collective behavior that supports survival across seasons. Within this system, there are three primary types of bees: the queen, the drones, and the workers. Each has a specific role that contributes to the stability of the colony as a whole. The queen is the primary reproductive individual. Her presence maintains cohesion through chemical signals that influence behavior and organization within the hive. She does not gather nectar or produce honey directly, but her role ensures continuity of the colony's population. Drones exist for reproduction. They do not participate in foraging, wax production, or nectar processing. Their numbers fluctuate with the seasons, increasing during periods of abundance and decreasing when resources become limited. The majority of activity within the hive is carried out by worker bees. These are all female and perform nearly every task required to sustain the colony. Worker bees do not specialize permanently in a single role. Instead, their tasks change gradually as they age. This age-linked progression allows the colony to distribute labor efficiently without centralized control. In the earliest stage of adult life, worker bees remain inside the hive. They clean cells, tend to developing larvae, and help regulate temperature and airflow. These tasks support both brood development and honey processing. As workers mature, they begin producing wax and assisting with nectar handling. They help receive nectar from foragers, spread it into cells, and expose it to air to encourage evaporation. Later in life, many workers transition into roles that require leaving the hive. They become guards, builders, and eventually foragers. Foraging is physically demanding and exposes bees to greater environmental risk, which is why it typically occurs later in the worker's lifespan. Foragers collect nectar, pollen, water, and plant resins. They navigate across landscapes using visual landmarks, the position of the sun, and internal timekeeping mechanisms. Distances traveled vary depending on resource availability. When a forager locates a productive source of nectar, information is shared within the hive. Movement patterns and chemical cues allow other bees to locate the same area. This communication increases efficiency without the need for planning or instruction. Inside the hive, workers regulate internal conditions continuously. They generate heat by flexing their flight muscles and cool the hive by circulating air with their wings. This regulation maintains temperatures that support brood development and nectar dehydration. Honey production fits into this system as a form of energy storage. Nectar arrives intermittently, tied to flowering cycles and weather conditions. Honey provides continuity when those flows stop. The placement of honey within the hive reflects this function. Honey storage cells are arranged to support easy access and thermal stability. Brood cells occupy different regions, reflecting different temperature and care requirements. This organization is not static. As conditions change, bees adjust where resources are stored and how space is used. The hive reshapes itself gradually in response to internal needs. Throughout all of this, bees follow patterns shaped through long evolutionary history. Their actions are guided by sensory cues rather than intention or foresight. Each bee responds to local signals, scent, temperature, available space, and colony chemistry. Honey emerges as a result of these responses. It is not planned or produced on demand. It accumulates when conditions allow. In times of abundance, honey stores grow. In times of scarcity, they are drawn down. This balance allows the colony to survive periods when flowers are absent. Viewed this way, the honeybee colony appears less as a collection of individuals and more as a living process, a system that maintains itself through repetition, coordination, and gradual adjustment. Honey reflects this system. It carries the imprint of collective labor rather than individual effort. It holds within it the quiet rhythm of a colony working together, day after day, in response to the world around it. Through this shared structure, honey becomes possible. Stored energy shaped by cooperation, patience, and biological order. Honey carries with it the quiet record of many small journeys. Its presence reflects distance traveled, time spent, and effort repeated. Each drop of honey begins as nectar gathered in tiny quantities. A single flower offers only a fraction of what is needed. To fill one crop, a foraging bee must visit hundreds and often thousands of blossoms. These visits happen one after another, spread across minutes and hours. Each landing contributes a small amount. Each flight consumes energy. When viewed individually, these actions appear modest. When viewed collectively, they accumulate into scale. It has been estimated that producing about 1 pound of honey involves millions of flower visits. The total distance flown by the bees involved can add up to tens of thousands of miles. This distance is not traveled by a single bee, but shared across many foragers, each following short routes repeatedly. This scale emerges from repetition rather than intensity. Bees do not travel long distances all at once. They return to the same areas again and again, guided by memory, scent, and visual cues. Foraging distances vary. When flowers are abundant nearby, bees remain close to the hive. When resources are sparse, they travel farther. Each trip reflects the balance between energy gained and energy spent. Nectar provides immediate fuel for flight. As bees collect nectar, they also consume it to power their muscles. This dual role of nectar, as cargo and as fuel, shapes foraging patterns. Back at the hive, nectar becomes part of a shared reserve. Once processed and stored as honey, it represents more energy than was used to collect it. This surplus supports the colony beyond the moment of collection. Honey serves as long-term fuel, In temperate regions, it sustains the colony through winter when flowering plants are absent. During this time, bees cluster together and generate warmth by flexing flight muscles. Honey provides the energy that makes this possible. Because honey supports survival during periods of scarcity, bees tend to collect more nectar than is immediately needed. This accumulation appears as surplus only when conditions allow. The size of a honey harvest depends on many factors: flower density, weather patterns, length of the flowering season, colony strength. In favorable years, a colony may store dozens of pounds of honey beyond its immediate needs. In lean years, stores may remain modest. This variability reflects environmental conditions rather than effort alone. Bees respond to what is available. They adjust activity to match opportunity. From the outside, honey may appear abundant. From within the system, it represents careful balance. Every foraging decision carries cost. Flight exposes bees to weather, predators, and fatigue. Energy spent on one resource cannot be spent elsewhere. The colony manages this balance without planning. Individual bees respond to cues indicating nectar availability and colony demand. Collectively, these responses shape the flow of resources. Honey storage allows the colony to smooth out fluctuations. It transforms brief moments of abundance into extended support. This storage is spatially organized within the hive. Honey is placed where it can be accessed efficiently during times of need. Its position reflects both temperature gradients and movement patterns inside the hive. When winter arrives, the work budget shifts. Foraging stops. The colony turns inward. Bees consume honey slowly, conserving energy. The store that once represented outward movement becomes inward sustenance. In this way, honey embodies deferred work. Effort expended earlier supports life later. The distance traveled and flowers visited are not goals. They are outcomes of steady behavior repeated across time. Honey does not announce this history. It holds it quietly. Within its density lies the trace of flight paths, flower shapes, and weather patterns. Each spoonful represents accumulated motion, captured and preserved. Through honey, the work of many individuals becomes one shared resource. Stored energy shaped by repetition, patience, and environmental rhythm. Honey does not exist on its own within the hive. It is held, shaped, and protected by structure. That structure is the honeycomb. Honeycomb is built from beeswax, a substance produced by worker bees through a slow biological process. Wax begins as liquid secreted from specialized glands on the underside of a bee's abdomen. As it emerges, it cools and hardens into thin, translucent scales. These wax scales are softened through chewing and warmth. Once pliable, they are shaped and joined to form cells. Cell by cell, the comb grows. The most recognizable feature of honeycomb is its repeating hexagonal pattern. Each cell has 6 sides, fitting tightly against its neighbors. This arrangement allows many cells to share walls, reducing the amount of wax needed while maximizing storage space. The shape is efficient, but it also emerges naturally from the way wax behaves when softened and pulled into place by many bees at once. As cells press against one another, curved walls settle into straight lines. The pattern stabilizes through repetition. Honeycomb serves more than one purpose. Some cells are used to raise young bees. Others are reserved for honey storage. Though similar in shape, these cells are positioned in different regions of the hive to support temperature control and access. Cells intended for honey are angled slightly upward, typically between 9 and 14 degrees. This gentle tilt helps keep liquid honey from flowing out before it thickens. It allows gravity to assist storage rather than work against it. As nectar is deposited into these cells, it spreads across the wax surface. Air circulates above it. Moisture escapes. Once the honey reaches the appropriate concentration, the cell is sealed with a thin wax cap. This cap protects the honey from absorbing moisture from the surrounding air and helps preserve its internal balance. Wax itself plays a role in regulation. It insulates. It absorbs and releases heat slowly. It supports the hive's ability to maintain steady internal conditions. Over time, honeycomb changes in appearance. Cells used for brood rearing darken as successive generations of bees leave behind thin layers of cocoon material. Honey storage cells tend to remain lighter, reflecting their different use. Wax is not an abundant resource for bees. Producing it requires energy. Bees must consume honey to create wax, converting stored sugars into building material. Because of this cost, comb is preserved whenever possible. Beekeepers often extract honey without destroying the comb, allowing it to be reused season after season. The physical relationship between wax and honey is close. Wax provides containment and protection. Honey provides energy. Together, they form a stable system. Honey is held securely, shielded from excess moisture and environmental fluctuations. Wax remains firm yet flexible, adapting to temperature changes inside the hive. The honeycomb also shapes how honey is stored spatially. Honey is typically arranged above or around brood areas, creating a buffer of stored energy. This placement allows bees to move upward through honey stores during colder months while remaining clustered. In this way, structure supports behavior. The layout of comb influences movement, access, and survival. Honeycomb has inspired human observation for centuries. Its regularity suggests order. Its efficiency suggests balance. Yet within the hive, it is simply the result of many small actions repeated. Bees build where there is space. They add wax where needed. They adjust as conditions change. Honeycomb does not require planning. It emerges through coordination. Within its walls, honey rests, dense, concentrated, and protected. The wax does not alter the honey's chemistry. It supports its preservation by limiting exposure and maintaining form. Together, honey and wax demonstrate how material and process align. One holds energy, the other holds shape. Through honeycomb, honey gains a place to settle, a structure that supports stillness, storage, and time. And within that structure, honey remains, quietly contained, patiently held, ready to endure. Long before honey was stored in jars or sold in markets, humans encountered it in the landscape. These encounters were occasional, risky, and guided by observation rather than control. Some of the earliest evidence of human honey gathering appears in prehistoric rock art. Paintings found on cave walls show figures climbing toward nests, reaching into crevices and interacting with bees. These images suggest that honey was recognized early as a valuable substance, dense, lasting, and worth effort. In these early contexts, honey was not produced. It was discovered. people followed bees. They learned where hives were likely to form. They watched flight paths and listened for activity in trees and rock faces. Harvesting honey meant approaching a living system already in motion. Over time, methods became more deliberate. As human societies settled and agriculture developed, interactions with bees shifted from chance encounters to ongoing relationships. Beekeeping emerged gradually. Instead of searching for wild nests, people began providing spaces where bees could live. Hollow logs, clay vessels, woven baskets, and later wooden boxes. These structures allowed honey to be gathered more predictably. Throughout this transition, one challenge remained consistent: accessing honey without disrupting the colony entirely. Modern honey harvesting reflects this balance. Beekeepers remove only a portion of the honey stored by a colony, leaving enough to support the bees through periods when nectar is unavailable. The amount taken depends on climate, season, and colony strength. In regions with cold winters, bees rely heavily on stored honey for survival. Harvesting practices take this into account. Beekeepers monitor stores and adjust accordingly. One of the most recognizable tools used during honey harvesting is smoke. Smoke does not calm bees in a psychological sense. Instead, it interferes with chemical communication. Bees use alarm pheromones to coordinate defensive responses. Smoke masks these pheromones, making it more difficult for bees to signal one another. At the same time, smoke triggers a feeding response. When bees sense smoke, they begin consuming honey. This behavior is thought to be linked to natural fire responses, preparing the colony to relocate if needed. With their bodies occupied and communication reduced, bees are less likely to sting. This effect is temporary and situational. It allows beekeepers to work within the hive with reduced disturbance, but it does not eliminate risk or activity. Harvesting itself is typically done during periods of abundance. When flowers are producing nectar, bees are actively replenishing stores. Honey taken during these times represents surplus rather than necessity. Beekeepers observe hive behavior to determine readiness. Cells filled with ripe honey are capped with wax. These caps signal that the honey has reached appropriate concentration and stability. Once harvesting begins, bees are gently moved away from the honey-containing frames. This may involve brushing, shaking, or the use of one-way escape devices that allow bees to leave but not return. Throughout this process, timing matters. Weather conditions, temperature, and colony activity all influence how bees respond. Human honey harvesting has always required adaptation. Techniques vary by region, shaped by climate, available materials, and cultural tradition. In some parts of the world, honey is still collected from wild nests, using methods similar to those depicted in ancient art. In others, beekeeping has become a managed practice integrated into agriculture and pollination systems. Despite these differences, the underlying interaction remains consistent. Humans access a stored resource created by bees. They do so by reading signals, wax caps, hive weight, seasonal patterns. Honey harvesting does not create honey. It reveals what has already accumulated. The act itself is brief compared to the time required for honey to form. Months of foraging, processing, and storage precede a single moment of removal. Once harvested, the honey leaves the hive, but its origins remain visible in its density, color, and aroma. Through thousands of years, human honey harvesting has remained an act of engagement rather than production. It reflects observation, timing, and restraint. Honey continues its quiet existence beyond the hive, carrying with it the trace of both insect labor and human presence, joined briefly through careful interaction, then separated once again. Once honey has been gathered from the hive, it enters a new phase. The work of the bees is complete. What remains is the careful task of separating honey from wax while preserving its structure. This process is known as extraction. In modern beekeeping, honey is typically stored in removable frames. These frames hold sheets of honeycomb, each cell filled and sealed with a thin wax cap once the honey has matured. Harvesting begins when these frames are heavy with honey. Before removal, bees are encouraged to leave the frames gently. This may involve brushing them away, shaking the frame lightly, or using one-way escape boards that allow bees to move out of the honey area. Once removed from the hive, the frames carry a visible pattern. Rows of hexagonal cells, each sealed with wax, hold honey in place. The wax caps signal that the honey inside has reached the proper concentration. The first step of extraction is uncapping. This involves removing the thin wax layer that seals each cell. Uncapping is done carefully. Knives or heated blades slide across the surface of the comb, slicing off the caps. As the wax is lifted away, honey becomes exposed beneath it. The removed wax caps are often collected separately. They still contain small amounts of honey and may be drained slowly over time. Once uncapped, the frames are placed into an extractor. An extractor is a drum-shaped device that uses centrifugal force. As the extractor spins, honey is pulled outward from the cells. The force draws honey from the comb walls, allowing it to flow downward along the interior of the drum. This motion is steady rather than violent. Frames are spun at controlled speeds to prevent damage to the wax structure. After one side is emptied, frames are reversed so the other side can be cleared. As honey flows from the frames, it collects at the bottom of the extractor. From there, it is drained through a valve into containers. At this stage, the honey is fluid and opaque with motion. It may contain small fragments of wax, bubbles of air, and traces of pollen. The next step is straining. Honey is passed through coarse filters or screens that remove larger particles. This process does not alter honey's chemistry. It simply removes debris introduced during extraction. Straining allows honey to settle more evenly. As it rests, air bubbles rise to the surface. Foam may form and can be skimmed away. This settling period is important. It gives honey time to become still again after movement. The liquid clears gradually, returning to its slow, cohesive flow. Some honey is bottled soon after straining. Other batches are allowed to rest longer before packaging. Time allows remaining particles to separate naturally. The comb itself is preserved during extraction. Once emptied, frames are returned to the hive. Bees clean residual honey and reuse the wax structure. This reuse is significant. Producing wax requires energy. By preserving comb, bees can focus on collecting nectar rather than rebuilding. Extraction methods are designed to respect this balance. They remove honey while allowing the hive structure to remain intact. Different regions and beekeepers adjust extraction methods based on scale and tradition. Small operations may extract by hand. Larger operations rely on mechanized systems. Despite these differences, the underlying steps remain similar. Uncap, spin, strain, settle. Throughout the process, honey retains its essential character. No ingredients are added. No substances are removed beyond wax fragments and air. The extraction process reveals honey's physical properties. It shows how honey flows when moved, how it settles when left undisturbed, and how it responds to gravity and time. After extraction, honey appears smooth and uniform. Its movement slows. Its surface becomes reflective again. The work of separation is complete. Honey exists once more as a dense, cohesive liquid, free from its container, yet unchanged in composition. Extraction does not create honey. It allows honey to leave the structure that held it. Once free, honey carries forward the record of its formation. Its thickness reflects concentration. Its color reflects flowers and time. After motion and settling, honey rests again, ready to continue its slow existence beyond the hive, shaped by the same quiet balance that formed it. Not all honey leaves the hive through spinning machines and metal drums. Some forms of honey remain closer to their original structure, carried out through slower, more tactile methods. One of the oldest ways to experience honey is as comb honey. In this form, honey is left exactly where it was stored, inside the wax cells built by bees. Comb honey is cut directly from the hive and eaten with the wax intact. The honeycomb itself becomes part of the experience. As it is chewed, the wax softens and releases the honey held within. The wax does not dissolve. It is worked gently by warmth and pressure, then set aside. This method changes how honey is perceived, extending the act of eating into a longer, slower interaction. Comb honey reflects honey in its most contained state. Each cell holds a small portion. Each bite opens a handful of chambers at once. The texture differs from liquid honey. There is resistance before release. Sweetness arrives gradually as cells collapse and honey spreads. This form of honey requires minimal handling. There is no uncapping, spinning, or filtering. Honey remains within the structure built to hold it. Because comb honey includes wax, it carries more of the hive's material presence. It reflects the geometry of the comb and the density of the cells. It also reflects the energy invested by bees to create that wax. Producing wax requires bees to consume honey. Sugars are metabolized and converted into building material. For this reason, wax represents stored energy transformed into structure. When honeycomb is removed and not reused, that structure must be rebuilt. This rebuilding requires additional honey consumption by the colony. Because of this cost, many beekeepers limit how often comb is removed entirely. Preserving wax allows bees to focus energy on foraging rather than reconstruction. Another traditional method of honey extraction is known as crush and strain. This method involves breaking down the honeycomb to release the honey it contains. In crush and strain, comb is removed from the hive and physically crushed. The cells collapse. Honey flows out. The crushed mixture is then placed into a strainer or cloth. Gravity does the rest. Over time, honey separates from wax and drips into a container below. This process is slow. There is no spinning force. Honey moves at its own pace. As it drains, honey carries small amounts of air and wax fragments. These settle gradually as the honey rests. Crush and strain methods are often used with certain hive styles that do not rely on reusable frames. They are common in small-scale beekeeping and traditional contexts. This method emphasizes patience. Extraction may take hours or days rather than minutes. Honey thickens and clears as it settles. The resulting honey retains its natural structure. It has not been heated or mechanically altered. Its texture reflects gravity and time rather than motion. However, crush and strain sacrifices the comb. Once crushed, wax cannot be returned to the hive in its original form. Bees must rebuild. Because wax production carries an energetic cost, many beekeepers prefer extraction methods that preserve comb. Returning intact frames allows bees to clean and reuse the structure. Each method reflects a different relationship between time, labor, and material. Comb honey emphasizes direct experience. Crush and strain emphasizes simplicity and minimal tools. Frame extraction emphasizes efficiency and reuse. None of these methods changes honey's chemistry. They differ only in how honey is separated from wax and how much structure is preserved. In all cases, honey responds the same way once freed. It flows, it settles, it thickens. Older methods reveal honey's patience. Without machines, honey still separates. Without force, it still finds its way downward. These approaches slow the process to match honey's natural pace. They allow gravity, warmth, and time to do the work. Through comb honey and crush and strain, honey remains close to its origin. It carries wax, structure, and texture alongside sweetness. In these forms, honey feels less like a product and more like a material, one that invites touch, waiting, and attention. Removed gently or allowed to drain slowly, honey continues its quiet movement, shaped not by speed, but by the steady passage of time. Once honey has been removed from the hive, it may follow different paths before reaching storage or use. These paths influence how honey looks, how it behaves over time, and how quickly it changes. The terms most often used to describe these differences are raw and processed. These words refer to handling, not origin. Raw honey is honey that has undergone minimal intervention after extraction. It is typically strained to remove larger pieces of wax or debris, but it is not subjected to high heat or fine filtration. In this state, honey retains many of the small components present when it left the hive. Tiny particles of pollen may remain suspended. Fragments of propolis or wax may be present in very small amounts. Enzymes introduced during nectar processing are largely intact. These components influence how raw honey behaves. The presence of pollen and wax particles provides surfaces where glucose crystals can begin forming. As a result, raw honey often crystallizes more quickly than honey that has been heavily filtered. Raw honey may appear cloudy or opaque when first extracted. As it rests, air bubbles rise and particles settle. Over time, clarity may increase, though some haze often remains. Processed honey follows a different route. After extraction, it is typically heated and filtered under pressure. Heating lowers viscosity, allowing honey to flow easily through very fine filters. Fine filtration removes small particles that would otherwise remain. Pollen grains, wax fragments, and other microscopic materials are reduced or removed. This results in a honey that appears clearer and more uniform. Heating also affects enzymes. Enzymes are sensitive to temperature. As heat increases, their activity decreases. Prolonged or high-temperature heating reduces enzymatic presence more significantly. One enzyme often discussed in this context is diastase. Diastase activity decreases with heat exposure and time. For this reason, it is sometimes used as a marker of honey's processing history. Processed honey tends to remain liquid for longer periods, with fewer particles available to act as seed crystals, and with sugars more evenly dissolved through heating. Crystallization is delayed. This extended liquidity is often preferred for convenience and appearance. Honey pours smoothly and remains clear on shelves. Both raw and processed honey remain chemically stable when stored properly. Their sugar concentration and acidity continue to support preservation. The difference lies primarily in structure and behavior rather than safety. Raw honey reflects the hive more closely. Processed honey reflects controlled handling. Neither form requires additives to remain intact. Both rely on honey's natural balance of sugars and water. Over time, even processed honey may crystallize. Temperature, moisture exposure, and storage duration continue to influence behavior. It is also worth noting that labeling terms vary by region. The word raw does not always follow a single standardized definition. Practices may differ depending on local guidelines and traditions. Because of this, observing honey's behavior often reveals more than its label. Cloudiness, crystallization speed, and aroma provide clues to how it has been handled. Raw honey tends to show variation. Each batch may differ slightly in color or texture. Processed honey aims for consistency. Neither approach alters honey's fundamental identity as a concentrated sugar solution shaped by bees. They differ in how much of the original material context is preserved. Heating does not transform honey into something else. It changes viscosity, enzyme activity, and crystallization patterns. Filtering does not remove sugars or acids. It removes particles. These differences influence how honey interacts with time. Raw honey changes more visibly. Processed honey changes more slowly at first. Both forms continue to respond to temperature, moisture, and storage conditions. Both remain sensitive to their environment. Understanding these distinctions allows honey to be seen as a material shaped by handling choices, not better or worse, simply different expressions of the same substance. Through raw and processed forms, honey demonstrates how small changes in treatment influence texture, clarity, and pace, while its underlying stability remains unchanged. Honey remains honey, shaped quietly by the path it follows after leaving the hive. Honey is stable, denser, and long-lasting. Its structure resists most forms of spoilage. For older children and adults, it is generally safe to consume when handled and stored properly. There is, however, one specific exception that is important to understand clearly. honey can naturally contain microscopic bacterial spores. These spores are present in soil and dust and may enter honey through environmental contact during nectar collection and processing. In most people, these spores pass through the digestive system without effect. The mature digestive tract, along with established gut bacteria, prevents them from becoming active. In infants under 1 year of age, the situation is different. An infant's digestive system is still developing. The balance of gut bacteria has not yet fully formed, and natural defenses are not yet complete. In this environment, certain bacterial spores, specifically Clostridium botulinum, can become active. When this happens, the bacteria may produce a toxin that interferes with normal nerve signaling. This condition is known as infant botulism. It is important to note that honey itself does not cause illness through spoilage or contamination in the usual sense. The spores involved are naturally occurring and harmless to most people. The risk exists only because of the unique vulnerability of the infant digestive system. For this reason, honey is not recommended for infants under 12 months of age. This guideline applies to all forms of honey: raw honey, processed honey, filtered honey, cooked foods containing honey. Heating does not reliably destroy bacterial spores. Even pasteurized or baked products may still contain them. Once a child's digestive system matures, typically after the first year of life, this risk diminishes significantly. At that point, honey becomes safe to consume under normal circumstances. This safety consideration does not reflect a flaw in honey. It reflects the interaction between a natural substance and a developing biological system. In older children and adults, honey's chemical properties work in the opposite direction. Low water availability, acidity, and sugar concentration limit bacterial growth rather than support it. Honey does not provide a suitable environment for Clostridium botulinum to grow or multiply. The concern lies only in the potential for spores to activate after ingestion in infants. This distinction is sometimes misunderstood. Honey does not contain active botulinum toxin. It may contain dormant spores that pose a risk only in a very specific context. Because of this, the safety recommendation is narrow and precise. Avoid honey for infants under 1 year of age. For others, honey remains a stable and widely used food. The same spores that raise concern for infants are present in many natural environments. They exist in soil, dust, and agricultural settings. Honey simply reflects its contact with the natural world. Understanding this context allows the safety guidance to remain calm rather than alarming. It is a matter of developmental timing, not danger in the substance itself. In many parts of the world, honey has been used for thousands of years. Across cultures and generations, people learned, often through experience, to avoid giving honey to very young infants. Modern medical understanding clarified the reason. This knowledge now serves as a simple guideline rather than a warning. One small adjustment in use ensures safety. Beyond this specific case, honey's stability remains remarkable. Its resistance to spoilage continues to set it apart from most foods. Its chemistry remains consistent. By recognizing this one exception, honey can be appreciated with clarity rather than concern. The guidance does not limit honey's broader role. It simply aligns its use with biological readiness. Honey remains what it has always been, a concentrated substance shaped by bees, plants, and time. Understanding how it interacts with different stages of human development allows it to be used thoughtfully and safely. With this quiet clarification in place, honey can continue to be understood as a stable food, a material shaped by nature, and a substance whose behavior is governed by balance rather than risk. This small note completes the picture, allowing honey's broader story to remain calm, grounded, and precise. For much of human history, honey has appeared in medical contexts. It was applied to wounds, mixed into remedies, and consumed during illness. These uses developed through observation long before modern explanations were available. Today, honey's medical role is understood more narrowly and more precisely. It is neither a cure-all nor a placebo. In specific situations, its physical and chemical properties can support healing. One of the most studied medical uses of honey involves wound care. In controlled settings, honey has been shown to support healing in certain types of wounds, particularly partial thickness burns and surface injuries. When applied to a wound, honey creates a moist environment. Moisture supports tissue repair by preventing drying and cracking. At the same time, honey's high sugar concentration draws fluid outward through osmotic pressure. This outward movement helps limit bacterial growth. Microorganisms require available water to multiply. Honey reduces that availability at the wound surface. Honey's acidity also plays a role. A lower pH environment discourages the growth of many bacteria and can support oxygen release in healing tissue. This combination of moisture retention and microbial limitation creates conditions that favor repair. In addition, honey contains small amounts of hydrogen peroxide produced through enzymatic activity. This release is slow and localized, unlike the application of strong antiseptics. The concentration remains low, reducing tissue irritation. Because of these combined effects, honey dressings have been used in medical settings. Specially prepared medical-grade honeys are sterilized and standardized for wound care. These products are regulated and differ from household honey in handling and consistency. Some of these medical honeys are derived from specific floral sources, such as Manuka honey, which has been studied for its antibacterial activity. In clinical use, these honeys are applied under controlled conditions rather than as general treatments. It is important to note that honey's effectiveness depends on context. It is not appropriate for all wounds. Deep, heavily contaminated or infected wounds require medical evaluation. Beyond wound care, honey has also been studied for its effect on cough. In children over 1 year of age, small amounts of honey given before bedtime have been shown in some studies to reduce nighttime coughing. This effect appears to be related to honey's viscosity and soothing properties. Coating the throat may reduce irritation and suppress the cough reflex temporarily. Honey's sweetness may also stimulate saliva production, further easing dryness. In some comparisons, honey performed as well as common over-the-counter cough syrups for nighttime symptom relief. These observations focus on comfort rather than treatment of underlying illness. For this reason, honey is sometimes recommended as a supportive option for cough in older children. It is not used to treat infection. It is used to reduce discomfort. Honey has also been explored for its role in oral health digestion, and inflammation. In these areas, evidence remains mixed. Some laboratory studies show antimicrobial effects under controlled conditions. Human outcomes vary. Because honey is primarily sugar, its consumption must still be balanced. Its potential benefits do not change its caloric content or metabolic impact. Medical interest in honey focuses on measurable effects rather than tradition alone. Researchers examine how honey interacts with tissue, moisture, and microbes. Where results are consistent, honey is incorporated carefully. Where results are uncertain, claims remain limited. This measured approach reflects modern understanding. Honey is not elevated beyond its properties. Its usefulness arises from what it physically does, rather than what it symbolizes. In this way, honey occupies a specific place in medicine. It is a supportive material rather than a universal remedy. Its effects are local, contextual, and dependent on proper use. By observing honey's behavior in medical settings, its broader nature becomes clearer. It supports healing through balance, moisture without saturation, sweetness without fermentation, acidity without damage. Honey does not override biology. It works within it. Seen this way, honey's medical role aligns with its larger story. A substance shaped by concentration and time, offering support where conditions allow, and remaining quiet where they do not. Honey has long been associated with health. Across cultures and centuries, it has been consumed during illness, added to tonics, and recommended for strength or comfort. Many of these uses grew from observation rather than measurement. In modern contexts, honey is often discussed through claims about what it may or may not do for the body. Some of these claims are supported in limited ways. Others remain uncertain. One commonly discussed idea is the use of local honey for seasonal allergies. The reasoning behind this idea is straightforward. Honey may contain traces of pollen from nearby plants, and repeated exposure might influence immune responses. When examined carefully, the evidence for this effect remains inconclusive. Studies have produced mixed results, and outcomes vary widely between individuals. One factor is pollen type. The pollen that triggers seasonal allergies often comes from wind-pollinated plants, such as grasses or trees. The pollen found in honey typically comes from insect-pollinated flowers. These are often different plants. Another factor is dose. The amount of pollen present in honey is very small. It is unclear whether this quantity is sufficient to influence immune sensitivity in a consistent way. Because of these variables, honey cannot be relied upon as a predictable approach to allergy relief. Some individuals may notice subjective changes. Others may notice none. This uncertainty does not negate personal experience. It places it within a broader context where controlled outcomes remain difficult to demonstrate. Another common claim involves comparisons between honey and refined sugar. Honey is sometimes described as being far healthier than sugar. From a chemical perspective, honey and sugar are different substances. Honey contains a mixture of fructose and glucose along with trace compounds. Refined sugar is typically sucrose, which the body breaks down into glucose and fructose during digestion. Because honey already contains these simpler sugars, it may be absorbed slightly differently. Some studies show that honey can produce a somewhat lower rise in blood sugar compared to an equal amount of refined sugar. This difference exists, but it is modest. Honey remains an added sugar. It provides calories primarily in the form of carbohydrates. Its metabolic impact still depends on quantity, timing, and overall diet. The presence of trace minerals, acids, and enzymes does not change this basic role. These components influence honey's structure and flavor more than its caloric effect. In practical terms, honey behaves like a concentrated energy source. It can be useful where quick energy is needed. It can also contribute to excess intake when consumed in large amounts. Moderation remains the relevant principle. Honey does not bypass the body's normal handling of sugars. It participates in it. Some claims suggest that honey supports digestion, immunity, or general vitality. Laboratory studies sometimes show antibacterial or antioxidant activity under controlled conditions. Translating these findings into consistent human outcomes is complex. The effects observed in test tubes or small trials may not scale directly to everyday consumption. Dose, form, and context all matter. This does not remove honey from health discussions. It places it within them more accurately. Honey can soothe. It can support comfort in certain situations. It can contribute flavor and energy. It does not replace medical treatment. It does not function independently of diet and lifestyle. Understanding honey's limits allows its strengths to be appreciated without exaggeration. It remains a food shaped by bees and plants, not a concentrated supplement. When health claims are viewed calmly, honey occupies a middle ground. It is neither ineffective nor exceptional. It is specific. Its effects arise from physical properties, viscosity, sweetness, acidity, and from how the body responds to them. These responses vary between people and circumstances. By keeping claims grounded, honey remains part of a broader pattern rather than an isolated solution. It fits within meals, traditions, and moments of comfort. This perspective aligns with honey's larger story. A substance formed through gradual accumulation, offering value through balance rather than intensity. Seen this way, honey supports health where conditions allow and remains neutral where they do not. It asks to be understood in proportion, not elevated beyond its nature. Through this lens, honey continues to exist quietly, neither promising more than it can give, nor losing the significance it has earned through long, steady use. Long before honey was measured, filtered, or labeled, it was already woven into human life. Across many early civilizations, honey appeared wherever people settled long enough to observe bees and recognize what they produced. In ancient Egypt, honey held a distinct place in daily life. It was consumed as food, offered in religious rituals, and used in practical care. Texts written on papyrus more than 3,000 years ago describe honey applied to wounds and eye conditions, often mixed with other substances. Honey was also used as a form of value. Records suggest it functioned as a tribute or tax, delivered to temples and rulers alongside grain and livestock. Its density, longevity, and labor-intensive origin made it suitable for storage and exchange. Archaeological discoveries reinforce this role. Sealed containers of honey have been found in Egyptian tombs, including those associated with royal burials. When opened centuries later, the honey remained chemically intact, its structure preserved by the same properties that protected it in life. In these contexts, honey served multiple purposes at once. It was nourishment, offering concentrated energy. It was symbolic, linked to offerings and continuity. It was practical, valued for preservation and care. Further north, in ancient Greece, honey was closely tied to food and physical endurance. Athletes consumed honey as a source of energy before competitions. Its quick availability of sugars made it suitable for sustained activity. Greek medical texts reference honey frequently. Writings attributed to Hippocrates describe honey used in various preparations, often combined with water, vinegar, or herbs. These uses were based on observation rather than chemical theory. Honey also appeared in religious offerings and daily meals. It sweetened breads, fruits, and wines. Its role was familiar rather than exotic. The Romans continued many of these practices and expanded them. Honey was widely used in cooking and food preservation. Fruits were boiled in honey to extend their storage life, an early form of jam making. Meat preservation also relied on honey in some cases. By limiting moisture and microbial activity, honey helped slow spoilage when refrigeration was not available. Roman agricultural writings describe beekeeping techniques and hive management. These texts show an understanding of seasonal rhythms and honey collection, grounded in observation. Across the Mediterranean and beyond, honey remained the primary sweetener for centuries. Refined sugar was rare or unavailable. Honey's role was practical, shaped by access rather than novelty. In parts of Asia, honey also appeared early in fermentation practices. Archaeological evidence from ancient China suggests that mixtures of honey, fruit, and rice were fermented as early as 7,000 years ago. These mixtures produced alcoholic beverages, relying on honey as a fermentable sugar source. This use highlights another aspect of honey's versatility. When diluted and combined with yeast, honey behaves differently. Its sugars become fuel for fermentation, rather than long-term storage. Across regions, honey adapted to local needs. In some places, it flavored drinks. In others, it preserved foods. In others still, it served ritual or symbolic roles. What these civilizations shared was an understanding of honey's reliability. It did not spoil easily. It could be stored, transported, and reused. Honey did not require explanation to be valued. Its properties were experienced directly. The ways honey appeared in ancient life were shaped by environment and culture. Flowering plants determined availability. Climate influenced storage needs. Social structures shaped how it was exchanged. There is little evidence of honey being treated as mysterious or magical in daily use. It was respected because it worked. Across time and geography, honey remained consistent in one way. It bridged immediate need and long-term planning. A substance that could be gathered during abundance and relied upon during scarcity. Through food, trade, medicine, and ritual, honey became embedded in human systems, not as a spectacle, but as a dependable presence. In these ancient contexts, honey's value did not come from novelty. It came from endurance. And through centuries of quiet use, honey carried its stability forward, unchanged in structure, yet deeply integrated into the rhythms of human life. Honey does not arrive all at once. It accumulates in response to cycles that unfold across the year. As seasons change, so do the conditions that make honey possible. Flowering patterns, temperature, daylight, and rainfall all shape when nectar is available and how long it lasts. In early spring, the honeybee colony begins to shift. As daylight increases and temperatures rise, the queen increases egg laying. The population inside the hive grows steadily. This expansion aligns with the first waves of flowering plants. Trees and early blooms begin producing nectar and pollen. Foraging activity increases as bees respond to these signals. During this period, much of the nectar collected is used immediately. It fuels brood rearing and the rapid growth of the colony. Honey stores may increase slowly, but the primary focus is internal development. As spring progresses into early summer, nectar flows often intensify. Fields, meadows, and gardens offer sustained sources of flowering plants. Foraging becomes more consistent. This is when honey production typically accelerates. Nectar arrives in larger quantities than the colony needs for immediate use. Excess is processed and stored. The hive expands its honey reserves during these weeks. Cells are filled, capped, and added to existing stores. Honey accumulates as a buffer against future scarcity. Summer does not offer constant abundance. Periods of intense flowering may be followed by gaps, sometimes referred to as nectar dearths. Weather conditions play a role. Extended heat, drought, or heavy rainfall can reduce nectar production. When this happens, foraging activity declines. The colony adjusts by conserving energy and relying more heavily on stored honey. In favorable conditions, a healthy colony may store dozens of pounds of surplus honey over the course of a season. In less favorable years, surplus may be minimal. This variability reflects environment rather than effort. Bees respond to what is available. They do not force production beyond what conditions allow. As summer moves toward autumn, the colony's priorities shift again. Flowering slows, daylight shortens. Drones, which require resources but do not contribute to winter survival, are gradually expelled from the hive. The colony reduces its population to a size it can support through the coming months. Honey storage becomes central. The bees assess what has been accumulated. Beekeepers, observing these patterns, determine how much honey can be removed without compromising the colony. In many regions, beekeepers leave substantial honey stores behind. If stores are insufficient, supplemental feeding may be provided to ensure survival. Autumn marks a period of consolidation. The hive reorganizes. Movement slows. As winter arrives, foraging stops entirely in colder climates. Flowers are absent. Nectar is unavailable. Bees do not hibernate. Instead, they form a cluster within the hive. By flexing their flight muscles, they generate heat. This heat keeps the cluster warm enough to survive freezing temperatures. Honey provides the fuel. Throughout winter, bees consume honey gradually. The cluster moves slowly through stored honey, maintaining contact with food while preserving warmth. This process is steady and controlled. Honey consumption supports life across months of stillness. In warmer climates, seasonal patterns differ, but cycles remain. Dry seasons replace cold ones. Flowering follows rainfall rather than temperature. In all cases, honey functions as stored time. Energy gathered during abundance sustains life during absence. The year repeats this pattern: expansion, accumulation, conservation. Honey reflects this rhythm. Its presence in the hive records past flowering events. Its consumption marks the passage of seasons. Honey does not exist independently of these cycles. It is shaped by them. Each jar of honey represents a particular year, a particular sequence of blooms, a particular balance of rain and warmth. When conditions shift through drought, altered flowering times, or changing climates, the cycle adjusts. Honey production changes accordingly. Through all of this, honey remains a measure of alignment between bees and plants. It accumulates when timing allows. It supports survival when timing withdraws. Season by season, honey moves quietly through the year. It gathers during motion and sustains during stillness. In this way, honey becomes a record of cycles rather than moments. A substance shaped by the long arc of the year, repeating itself patiently, one season at a time. Honey does not exist independently of the world around it. It forms only where plants, insects, climate, and land remain in alignment long enough for cycles to repeat. At its foundation, honey is connected to pollination. When bees collect nectar, they also move pollen between flowers. This transfer allows many plants to reproduce. A large portion of flowering plants rely on insect pollination. In agricultural landscapes, this relationship becomes especially visible. Orchards, fields, and gardens depend on bees to set fruit and seed. As bees move across these landscapes, honey forms as a secondary result. Nectar gathered for immediate energy becomes stored surplus. Honey appears where pollination activity has been sustained. Because of this link, honey reflects the health of surrounding ecosystems. Diverse plant life produces diverse nectar sources. Monocultures produce brief, intense flows, followed by absence. In regions with varied flowering plants, honey often shows complexity in flavor and aroma. In areas dominated by a single crop, honey reflects that narrow window. Beekeeping practices respond to these patterns. In some agricultural systems, hives are moved seasonally to follow blooming crops. This practice, known as migratory beekeeping, aligns colonies with flowering events. Hives may be transported from orchards to fields, then to later blooming regions. Each move positions bees where nectar and pollination services are needed. These movements shape the honey that forms. Each location contributes a different floral profile. Each bloom leaves a trace. At the same time, honey production remains sensitive to environmental pressures. Changes in land use alter available forage. Habitat loss reduces plant diversity. Pesticide exposure can affect bee behavior and survival. Drought limits nectar production. Shifts in temperature influence flowering times. When these pressures accumulate, honey yields often change. Colonies may produce less surplus. Foraging patterns may shift. In this way, honey functions as a quiet indicator. It reflects how well plants, bees, and conditions are synchronized. The concept is sometimes compared to terroir in wine. Just as soil, climate, and grape variety influence wine, local conditions shape honey. The mineral content of soil influences plant chemistry. Plant chemistry influences nectar composition. Nectar composition influences honey. Honey becomes an edible snapshot of place. Its color, aroma, and crystallization behavior carry information about where it formed. This does not require interpretation. It can be observed directly. When flowering is abundant and varied, honey reflects that richness. When flowering is limited or disrupted, honey shows restraint. Bees respond to environmental change quickly. Their short lifespans and constant foraging expose them to conditions as they unfold. Honey forms within these same timelines. Because of this responsiveness, changes in honey production often precede broader ecological signals. Declines in nectar availability appear before changes in stored honey become obvious. Honey does not cause ecological change. It records it. This record is incomplete, shaped by management decisions and seasonal variation. Yet patterns persist over time. In landscapes where habitats remain connected and diverse, honey production remains steady. In fragmented or stressed environments, honey reflects imbalance. Honey does not stand apart from ecology. It participates in it. Every jar of honey contains more than sugars. It contains the result of plant growth, insect movement, weather patterns, and land use. When environments change, honey changes with them. Not dramatically, gradually. This gradual responsiveness gives honey a quiet relevance. It does not announce disruption. It responds. Through honey, the relationship between bees and plants becomes tangible. Pollination, often unseen, leaves a material trace. Honey remains stable once formed, but its formation depends entirely on living systems in motion. Seen in this way, honey exists as both food and signal, a stored result of ecological alignment. As long as flowers bloom and bees move between them, honey will continue to form. Its presence reflects cooperation across species and time. In this sense, honey is less a product than a conversation between land, plant, and insect, one that continues quietly wherever conditions allow. Honey can be understood as a material before it is understood as a food. It has weight, it flows, it resists movement, then yields. When honey is cool, it holds its shape. When warmed, it loosens and moves more freely. This change does not alter what honey is. It alters how it behaves. Viscosity describes this behavior. It refers to how easily a substance flows. Honey has a high viscosity, meaning it moves slowly under gravity. When temperature rises, molecular motion increases. Sugars slide past one another more easily. Honey pours in longer, thinner streams. When temperature drops, movement slows. Honey thickens. Flow becomes deliberate. These shifts are continuous. There is no sharp boundary where honey becomes something else. It remains itself, responding gently to its surroundings. Honey can also exist between states, part liquid, part solid. Crystallized honey demonstrates this clearly. Solid glucose crystals sit within liquid sugar solution. The material holds both structures at once. Because of this, honey sometimes behaves in ways that feel unexpected. It may appear firm, yet soften with warmth. It may resist pouring, then suddenly begin to flow. These behaviors are not irregular. They follow simple physical rules. Honey does not require pressure or force to move. It responds to time. Given enough warmth and patience, honey will always settle. It will spread. It will find the lowest point. This slow responsiveness is part of honey's character. It does not rush to equilibrium. It approaches it gradually. Seen this way, honey becomes a visible example of quiet physics. Gravity acts on it continuously. Temperature shapes it steadily. Honey's movement tells a story without words. It shows how matter behaves when concentration is high and water is scarce. Beyond its physical behavior, honey also carries process within it. It is the endpoint of many smaller actions layered over time. Soil nourishes plants. Plants produce nectar. Bees collect nectar and transform it. Wax holds the result. Humans remove it carefully. Honey arrives in kitchens. This chain does not require haste. Each step unfolds at its own pace. Honey is often described as slow food, not because it must be eaten slowly, but because it is made slowly. No single moment creates it. No single action defines it. It forms through repetition, through small movements repeated many times. Flight after flight, transfer after transfer, evaporation after evaporation. When honey finally rests, it holds that history quietly. Nothing about it announces the work behind it. Yet the work remains present in its density and flow. Honey does not need explanation to exist. It behaves consistently, whether observed or not. Left on a shelf, it thickens or crystallizes. Left in warmth, it loosens again. Left sealed, it remains intact. These behaviors do not ask for attention. They simply occur. In this way, honey mirrors the systems that formed it. Bees do not rush. Flowers bloom when conditions allow. Seasons move forward without urgency. Honey exists comfortably within these rhythms. As the narration slows, honey remains dense, patient, responsive, a substance shaped by time rather than speed, by balance rather than force. It flows when allowed. It rests when left alone. And in that quiet behavior, honey offers something simple to observe: how matter settles, how processes accumulate, and how stability can arise from many small actions repeated gently over time. Honey continues, whether noticed or not, holding its form, responding to warmth, waiting without effort, and with that, it rests.